Software Engineering Radio episode 76, special episode on the Patterns Journal. Hello everybody, welcome to SE Radio. This is a special episode that we've briefly spontaneously recorded at Uppsala 2007 because we wanted to announce the new Patterns Journal. People always gave us feedback that they're interested in patterns and all the pattern community and stuff. So we thought, why not announce this new Patterns Journal on the podcast? The Patterns Journal is edited by Ralph Johnson and James Noble. And that's why those two guys are the guests of this episode. Why don't you guys introduce yourself briefly and give us our listeners an idea of why you're here.
So I'm Ralph Johnson. I'm a professor in the computer science department at the University of Illinois, and I've been doing patterns things for a long time. I was one of the people who wrote design patterns.
Right.
And I've been to every plop. I've been to a couple of Euro plops, a couple Chile plops. Never went to a koala plop or a sugarloaf plop, or haven't been to a Viking plop. I'm not sure what others. There's some in the works that haven't started yet, so I haven't been to those either. But I was at the mini plop that they had at Uppsala this year. Yeah. So there's a lot of different pattern events, and that's partly why we are starting the journal.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm the symbol formerly known as James Noble, and I'm a professor at software engineering at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. I've also obviously been working in patterns for a while. Perhaps I shouldn't say obviously, but I have been working in patterns for a while along with other things. And have attended plops and Europlops, which I just love, in Klostersee, in Kaufbeuren, well, obviously in Iersee. It's just a beautiful place. And was involved in setting up and running the koala plops in Australia. And we're hoping that there will be a koala plop in New Zealand.
Cool. So the reason why we kind of scheduled this special episode quickly and sneaked it in between some of the other episodes was that there is this new Patterns Journal going on.
Well, that's right. And this is something that the Hillside group, the patterns community, have been wanting to put together for a while.
At least 2 years.
And so we're very pleased that Springer Verlag, publisher of the world-famous in Heidelberg Lexinotes in Computer Science, have taken this journal on.
So what's the plan with this journal? Is it going to publish the proceedings of the conferences, or will it be somewhat orthogonal?
It's somewhat orthogonal, but it's closely related in the sense that the conferences will continue to have their own proceedings, but it's important for people who have never been to a conference, one of these conferences. They're very quite different from something like Uppsala, because the attitude of the program committee is to help the authors to make good papers, not to select good papers out of the large number that are submitted. So the whole event is organized around these writers' workshops where authors are given a lot of feedback from other authors, from attendees who typically are pretty knowledgeable about patterns. They're given a lot of feedback, and then they will leave the conference and go off and work some more on their papers and make them even better. Now, the journal was meant to be the next step in the publishing process. So you had it published at a plop, but you're still working on it. It's a work in progress. You're making it better and better, and then will come to the journal. The people really into patterns are going to like the journal because they'll be able to see latest things, but there'll always be a lot of patterns. There will be on topics they won't be interested in. There'll be plenty of patterns and topics they are interested in, and you sort of select the ones that are relevant to you and ignore the rest. But just like we buy the books that are relevant to us and ignore the rest. So it is a step beyond the plops. We're going to have a lot more reviewing. One of the things we're going to try to do is get content experts in. If you bring a paper on object-oriented programming to plop, you can get a lot of people who are really experts in object-oriented programming criticizing it. But if you bring a paper on real-time programming or avionics or all sorts of stuff that people bring. We can't tell you whether you're missing some important idea because nobody there is an expert on that. We had some papers on parallel programming that were brought to Plop in Illinois. Well, I had invited some of my professors in the department who are experts on that to actually come out and go to that. Yeah. So we were able to bring in some, but that's not what usually happens.
Right, that's true.
But it's something we recognize. This is a problem at the Plops, and people, but we want to have experts come from anything. We don't say it's only about object-oriented programming. Absolutely, we don't believe that. But that's where the pattern started, and so that's tends to be the sort of people who come to Plop. So that's one of the things we're going to do is try to bring in these content experts for reviewing, and we're going to have a lot higher standard of reviewing. We won't be quite so friendly as the Plops. Those conferences are very welcoming, really trying to make everybody feel comfortable. And if you're a first-time author and you're wondering where can I publish, I'll tell you it's much friendlier to publish to go to a Plop and have a paper there than your typical conference.
I can tell that from our own experience. If I look back at the stuff I submitted in '99, I guess, well, they were very friendly.
But the journal's going to be a bit more like a journal, and we're going to have high standards, and we're going to reject lots of papers. And just because you went to a Plop and you got through there, it may take you 3 or 4 rounds before you get past the journal review. That's, like I said, we want to have, it's a next stage. Right. And again, our motive is the same. We're trying to help create great literature, so our motive is the same, but now we're sort of expecting the people, you've gotten in, you sort of figured out a lot, and so we're going to move to the next level.
Yeah. So do you have to have a paper workshopped at a conference before you can submit it to the journal, or is that just a useful but not mandatory thing to do?
For now, we've said that you have to have a paper workshopped at not just anywhere, but one of the serious Hillside sponsored Plop conferences before you can have before you should submit your paper to a journal. And in fact, if you're thinking of submitting, we're asking people to tell us what was the latest Plop where the paper was workshopped and who was sort of running the workshop there. And this is not because we don't think that there's good works being done outside Plops, and there certainly are. It's because what the journal is about is publishing and collecting and recognizing the very best work that's done in patterns for software and for other things.
So somehow it takes over the role of the Plop D-books, of the 5 books that have been there, in a more, let's say, fine, granular and more regular way?
That's right. I'm very glad you mentioned that because, of course, people such as, in fact, I think everybody around this table have been an editor or involved in the Plop D-book series. But for reasons of their own, the publisher of that series decided that the series couldn't really carry on.
Sure.
And in lots of ways, it was a funny thing for that book series to be doing, because really what the Patterns Journal is doing, and will probably do better, is what those Plop D books were doing. They came out once every 2 or 3 years, so it was an event. It took 2 years they took about 2 years to produce, so they were always lagging behind stuff that was actually going to the Plops. And we're hoping that by setting up this more regular venue where material submitted to the journal, or rather material accepted to the journal, will be available online through the Springer Verlag website. You will be able to buy these books over Amazon.com once they come out.
So it's going to be electronic, the journal, or will it be printed?
Yes.
It'll be printed. It will be electronic. And print is important because one of the things that the Patterns Journal is explicitly setting out to do is encourage academics now to actually come in and not only write patterns, but also write papers that talk about patterns. So, for example, one of the questions that we always get about patterns is, where can I find good patterns for doing X? Whether X is finite state machines, or whether X is Ajax, or whether X is websites. And so one of the things we're hoping, if people submit these things, that will start appearing in the Patterns Journal is a guide to patterns about websites, for example.
Yeah. Can I keep my layout, the design, the layout, the white space that I put into patterns? I mean, patterns have always also been about nice literature, about writing nicely formatted, nicely looking, well-structured stuff. Will this go away to make it compatible to, I don't know, the LNCS format?
LNCS does have standards, but we can fit into that without too much trouble. In fact, one of the highlights of artistry is working within a set of constraints.
Okay. So we talked about how to submit. You first go to a conference, have your paper workshopped, and then there is a separate submission thing where I say, this is where I've been to the conference, here is the paper. Yes. And reading the journal works by going to some kind of website, thepatternsjournal.com, or where is it?
There will be a website. There also will be printed versions, so they'll both be there. One of the things, because of it being a part of the LNCS, it's going to be in libraries. I mean, there's, 1,000 libraries that subscribe to it. So it definitely is, it's an archival publication and doesn't depend just on the web. The Hillside group has a pointer to it too, so you can go to hillside.net and look up the journal.
Hillside.net/TPLOP, Transactions on Pattern Languages of Programming.
Okay, so to wrap this thing up, is there any highlights that you might have already planned for the first couple of episodes? Anything you want to point our listeners to explicitly?
Well, we have plans for things. We're expecting to frequently have special issues on topics. Right. What we're thinking is the first special issue will be on pedagogical patterns.
Wow, cool. When will the first episode? When will the first issue be available? What's the plan?
Well, we're hoping to have one by next summer.
Okay, cool. And then
we are promising Springer Verlag that we will do at least one a year, and we're aiming for 2 a year. But I think that if we had more, they would be happy to give more because it doesn't cost them a lot. So if we had 4 or 5 a year, if we actually had good material for that. So I'll just say that we are especially interested in reviewers. So if people... we'll have a place, if they go to the website, we'll have a place people can contact us and tell us what their expertise is.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the review is not necessarily about the patternness of something, so you don't have to be a pattern expert, it's about subject matter experts.
We sort of want to get beyond the patternness.
Right. And that's where you need the review specifically, because the patternness kind of can be reviewed by the PLOP conferences before it's submitted to the journal. Right.
So one of the things about patterns way back when was the idea of building a handbook for software architecture, that there would be a reference that would be on the shelf or in the library that when a practicing engineer needs to do something that maybe they don't know how to do, but they're sure has been done before, somewhere that they can go and they can find out about. Now, in almost every other engineering discipline, there are these kind of handbooks. Not everybody has them, but they're in libraries. Large engineering firms have got these things, and small engineering consultancies, you've got access to them. If you've worked with other kinds of engineers, whether it's roading engineers, whether it's aeronautical engineers, whatever, all this kind of information is available. And that was the dream of the patterns community when it first started, and we think that the Transactions on Pattern Languages of Programming is the next step in bringing that dream to reality for software engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Next step is a really important part of that, because we don't think that we're going to make that happen just with the journal, because you have to do, the journal is more of a continuing this bottom up of producing a lot of pieces of that. Somewhere, someone's going to have to come and do a top down. There have to be some organization that takes the effort.
Grady's book.
Grady's book is another step along there.
Franken Kevlin's magnum opus. Poser 19 to 27.
But actually, I think it's going to have to be a group like the ACM or IEEE or some international organization that really sponsors something like that.
Okay, thank you very much, you both, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Software Engineering Radio. If you want to get more information about Software Engineering Radio, or if you want to give us feedback, please go to our website at se-radio.net. You can also contact the team at team@se-radio.net, although we prefer entries in our comments system on the website so other people can see what you think. Software Engineering Radio wants to thank Henning Pauli for the intro and outro music, as well as Libsyn for providing the bandwidth. This episode of SE Radio, as well as all other episodes, is licensed under Creative Commons license. See the Software Engineering Radio website for details.